Imagine failing at everything in life and having absolutely no support or whatsoever. And people who are incels and all this, I don't clarify myself as an incel, but people like similar to me, they've had nothing but themselves. And then you wake up and you stare at the wall and you're thinking, nothing's changed. Like, I'm still in the same position, same period in life. But anyway, yeah, I sure hope I can make up for them lost years. I don't think you truly can, but maybe I can hopefully come to a point in my life where I'm content, where I'm happy, where, yeah, I missed out, but at least, I did get to have a bit of fun.
What dimmed the spark of hope we can still see in his eyes in July? What turned him from a frustrated virgin incel into an indiscriminate, absolutely cold-blooded murderer?
Having a cup of coffee, just out for gunshots.
A couple of the gunshots went off when I ran opposite a pub.
Seen a woman in the doorstep and walked over and helped her.
Shock and disbelief, really, at what's happened here in Plymouth.
She should never ever had a gun in the first place.
Describe Jake to me.
In mid-2021, Jake Davison was a 22-year-old man who lived in Plymouth, United Kingdom. He was struggling to move out of the house he shared with his mother at the end of the worldwide quarantines. He is frustrated with her for what he describes as a lifetime of abuse and financially exploiting his PIP, or personal independence payments, which is a social welfare payment he receives monthly in the UK for his disability, autism. In her defense, though, it's unclear how accurate this statement is, but Jake was very angry about it. He was autistic and had lifelong issues making friends. He held a license to have a shotgun for sport, but he briefly lost it after an assault charge in the last year. But the police had returned it just weeks before the tragedy. He didn't actually consider himself to be an incel, though he definitely was at first red-pilled, then black-pilled. So this means whether or not he's an incel is greatly a matter of interpretation, but in this case we can all simply agree that Jake was a deeply troubled man. The real question, though, is was Jake's mental health worsened by interacting with the online incel community and the manosphere? Did this influence or cause the tragedy? Well, Jake says he's not an incel, and spoke of how women had been attracted to him.
I did have girls into me. I had girls into me. I had them into me. Fucking stupid, ridiculous mental barriers, like for me, a lot of the reason I didn't was because I was fat as fuck.
He definitely had similar beliefs to other incels. Here's Jake talking about male incel-specific red pill ideology.
Women have to be more selective. It's a very dangerous thing, historically speaking, for thousands of years, for a woman to have sex with a man. They get pregnant, childbirth is dangerous, trying to raise this child. They need to be more selective with who they have sex with. What is looks? Not the only factor, but it is an indicator of genetic health. That a mentally retarded person is very unattractive more often than not. Why? Because it's a sign of health and genetic fitness. Yeah, there are some guys that you could say are stupid that look good. Social media and thinking they're princesses and all this. Women have nothing but options. They're very, 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 very picky. You talk about intelligence, smartness. Women don't fuck about none of that unless you got that. Do you think they care about the little autistic kid in the corner who's won the mathematical international Olympiad or whatever the hell? They don't give a fuck. The reality is that women don't need men no more, and they certainly don't want and don't need average men and below average. This should be basic known stuff.
Hypergamy is a big part of this concept, and to me seems like the central tenet of red pilling. Here's Jordan Peterson on the subject.
We diverged from the common ancestor between us and chimpanzees about 6 million years ago. Here's why, at least in part. Chimpanzee females are non-discriminate maters. They'll mate with any male. Now, the dominant males chase the subordinate males away, and so the dominant males are more likely to leave offspring, but it's not because of the female choice. It's not the case with human beings. Human females engage in hypergamy. Women mate across and up dominance hierarchies. Men mate across and down. Obviously, it has to work that way. If one goes up, the other has to go down. The socioeconomic status of a woman determines almost zero of her attractiveness towards a man, whereas the socioeconomic status of a man is a major determinant of his attractiveness towards a woman. And it isn't his wealth either, because that's been tested. It's his capacity to generate and be productive and to share. That's a much more important element. And why not be chosen on the basis of that, especially because women have to have infants, and infants make the woman dependent, and the woman is just looking logically, rationally, and from an evolutionary perspective for someone who's useful enough to lend a hand. Women make intense demands on men, and it's no wonder. Because women engaged in hypergamy, at least in part, we diverged quite rapidly from chimpanzees. Now, there's two things that happened as far as I could tell. The men competed for competence, let's say. So the male hierarchy is a mechanism that pushes the best men to the top, virtually by definition. The effect of that is multiplied by the fact that women who are hypergamous peel from the top, and so that the males who are the most competent are much more likely to leave offspring, and that seemed to be what drove our cortical expansion, for example, which happened very, very rapidly over the course of evolutionary time.
So in a nutshell, while the term red pill has been co-opted by so many contradictory groups, it originally meant waking up to what Jake was talking about above, which we could pretty easily label awareness of social dynamics. And yes, by that I mean like mystery and RSD and clones. And ultimately, there are really only 5 options once you accept the red pill. 1, you can try to improve your life by getting rich or becoming a pickup artist like the seduction and make money gurus teach. 2, you could become a blue-pilled person and act as if social dynamics are just a lie. 3, you could cope. 4, you could become MGTOW. Or 5, you could completely give up and swallow the black pill. In other words, when you just completely give up and admit the hopelessness of it all, that's called taking the black pill. Anyone who has ever felt hopeless knows how easy it is to think in those kind of states, why even bother anymore? And this seems to be what happened to Jake. Though this is wrapped up in pill-based symbolism, you don't actually take these pills. You accept these beliefs as true and take a stance on the ramifications of them for your society and yourself. In a certain sense, it's a deepening of the anxiety and self-loathing that already exists within a certain group of people. In this case, mostly middle and upper-class white men. But there's basically a black pill for everything: race, income, mental health, looks, height, lifestyle, body type, random chance, attitude. Black pilling is really common in the incel community, and is also when the ideology really starts to become potentially dangerous to the black-pilled incel themselves, because a good number of them self-harm. But they may also become dangerous to those in their immediate vicinity, especially if they see women and Chads and Stacys as the problem. But once you've fully taken the black pill, you've basically nullified the point of anything. And the only escape is to renounce black pill ideas and restart your life, probably with a lot of coaching or therapy, because life, or at least parts of it, have become pretty hopeless and pointless after taking the black pill. When someone doesn't feel like they belong, they have an experience psychologists call thwarted belongingness. People have a deep need to connect with others in a meaningful way, romantic and sexual relationships being one of those ways for most people. Incels feel like their ability to be connected to others has been thwarted in many ways.
Do you believe that you deserve sex or intimacy from a woman?
I think everybody at some level deserves someone that loves them and, respects them, as long as you are also loving and respectful towards that person. They're an equal. You're not like seeking someone beyond yourself. You don't have like too high standards, I suppose.
But as people get more black-pilled, even trying seems more and more hopeless and pointless. Why bother? So you can see how this is likely to lead to suicidal ideation. And through my research of mass killers, I believe they are basically all suicidal people who feel like they are hopelessly distanced from others, often specific others. They cannot change course, and the world is to blame for this. In other words, they're feeling a sense of thwarted belongingness, plus a sense of hopelessness, plus a desire for retribution. The media paints all incels as sex-crazed misogynists who hate women and want to own them. But through the remainder of this video, I'd like you to consider if it's possible that the black pill is a wider experience than just hopelessness about relationships and sex.
Black pill doesn't just apply to incels, guys. It applies to a lot of guys. These days, not having sex for 6 months or a year for a lot of fucking guys is very, very common. Not getting one compliment from a person, extremely common.
Is the black pill possibly excuses and explanatory models people find after the onset of thwarted belongingness? Like a defense mechanism or a reaction formation of some sort? And if so, is there something deeper than just misogyny at play here?
Leech off decent, hard-working people, like me.
So, with all of this in mind, how did Jake go from red pill but optimistic to a full-blown black pill nihilist murderer? First, looking at Jake, one thing is clear. Insofar as lookism goes, he's a Chad. He's even got the chin that all the incel dudes get plastic surgery to have. So, what specifically made Jake feel this negatively about himself?
Stupid, ridiculous mental barriers, fat thighs, my fat stomach. Ugh. How often do you see actually mentally retarded people that look like male models? You don't, do you? I mean, I guess if that looks better to you. Still a fucking this, that, virgin, fat, ugly, whatever you want to call it.
He felt that despite trying excessively hard, it was worthless to try because no matter what, he was still worthless, and always would be, particularly because he was autistic, but also because he believed he missed out on formative sexual experiences as a teen that are blocking him from being able to have a partner because he's seen as inept and inexperienced to all women.
And they certainly don't want and don't need average men, and below average. To get ripped and lean, couldn't find a woman, was fat as fuck. I guess they're very, 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 very picky. That a mentally retarded person is very unattractive and below average. Stupid, ridiculous mental barriers. Women have nothing but options. Don't need average men and below average. I missed out on so much as a teenager. I hope I can make up for it. I'll do the best I can.
In the past, Jake and his mother had been very close, but for the last year or so, they'd gotten into more and more arguments. It's assumed that it may have been related to a growing misogyny in Jake's behavior. A member of the gym Jake worked out at told the Sun newspaper that he was using steroids and meth, but with the exception of that one news article and derivative content, I haven't found anything to corroborate that, so I think it's false. But the toxicology reports for this case have not been released. His life was clearly on a downward spiral. His mom was trying to get Jake some help, but like the rest of the counseling and therapy industry post-lockdowns, they were incredibly backed up. She even tried to get a police welfare check, but nothing came of it, and attempting to help him in this way just fueled Jake's anger at her. However, this was not the first time that Jake's temper had caused him problems with others.
It seemed to me that sometimes that he didn't really have the concept of consequences for actions.
Over the previous 5 years, he was involved in 2 assaults. The first assault was against Scott Hobbs, 25, outside a location of the British supermarket chain Tesco in 2016. Despite never interacting before, Jake punched Scott, knocking him to the ground, where he kicked the man an additional 15 to 20 times, mostly in the head, screaming, "You shouldn't have said that!" He also knocks over Scott's pregnant girlfriend, Sherry, causing her to fall on her stomach, which caused fears of a miscarriage for the next week or so. She crawled into the Tesco store and notified a security guard who came out, which caused Jake to flee on a bicycle. Jake also managed to attack Scott in a blind spot of the security cameras, so the incident is not shown. However, you can see Jake bike in and out of the blind spot. The very next day, Scott was at the grocery store and saw Jake. He immediately called the police to inform them that his attacker was there. Jake saw them and menacingly came over to Scott and Sherry. He stalked them through the parking lot, pretending to fire a gun at them and saying, "I'm gonna get a gun onto you." The police came and took Jake aside to talk to him, but didn't arrest him. They gave Scott a pamphlet about being a victim of crime. After that, Jake would trail them if he ever saw the couple, and would sometimes walk by their house and stare at their window until they moved in 2018. Unfortunately, the police didn't take this very seriously and nothing came of the report. Had the police taken this more seriously, he probably wouldn't have been able to get his shotgun license in 2017. Further, on the shotgun license, his general practitioner wrote a generic report that he honestly didn't know the man well enough to say whether or not he should have a gun. And Jake's father actually pleaded with the police not to give him the license.
I phoned them up and told them these things. It's not a water pistol, is it? You're not asking, Dad, can I have a water pistol? It's a shotgun, for pity's sake.
But Jake had also been the perpetrator of a more recent assault in September 2020. Apparently, Jake just walked up to 2 boys who were skateboarding and started punching one of them in the face, and then kicking him in the head after the boy fell on the ground. A girl tried to stop Jake, yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" He spit in her face and told her to go to hell before he hit her and said, "I hate women." This left the boy in the hospital for a day with a broken nose, dislocated jaw, bruised ribs, and a black eye. This incident, luckily, was handled by the police and caused the revocation of his license to hold a firearm for sport in the UK in December 2020. However, he completed his anger management courses through the Pathfinder program quickly, and his pump-action shotgun was returned in late July 2021, not even a month before tragedy struck. Alongside this flirtation with blackpill ideology, Jake also gets obsessed with the idea that because he's a 22-year-old virgin that he's missed out and will never be able to reclaim his passion from being a teenager. Particularly, he believes that he missed out on the formative sexual experiences of losing his virginity as a teen, and now it's like he's supposed to live as an adult without ever having the ritual that would have made him a man, in a sense, losing his virginity.
Well, I hate it when people say, "Oh, teenage love is overrated." Here's the thing, they think guys that are virgins until they're old must think it's some romantic movie or some, teenage romance movie or something. No, I don't think of it like that. The reality is that You know, love is for the young. I know I'm still somewhat young, and I hope I can make up for it, but I have a feeling like I'll miss that boat and it's never coming back.
So he skipped that very important step in his development. And for him, it's pointless to try because even if he gets a girlfriend, she'll already be beyond his level of development. So she will find him inferior, and also, because of so many Chads having eroded her ability to love, she will be so broken so as to not really have that magic love is supposed to deliver.
Let's say I'll get with a woman my age. She's had a million relationships, likely been destroyed and broken and torn apart by fucking Chad.
He obsessively asked Reddit things like if he missed out by being an adult virgin, or if anyone had lost their virginity as an adult and still had a great experience that captured the kind of passion people have at 16. And if there's any point to life at all. He also obsessively asked Reddit about his attractiveness, but eventually gives up on this.
Posing the question, am I ugly? Brutally honest.
He's convinced that he's a bottom-of-the-barrel partner because he's autistic, a virgin, and has become fat and uglier.
The primary role that women have in relationship to men is to make them self-conscious.
Mental barriers are very unattractive.
Mother Nature, in the guise of that particular woman, has said, you're not so bad for a friend, but there's no reason that your genetic material should propagate itself into the future.
They're very, 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 very picky.
There's nothing that will make a man more self-conscious than being rejected.
Don't need below average.
So while he's arguably an incel, he's also frustrated about something else. He feels like he missed out on a rite of passage, and now the time has passed, and so he's too old to truly have the types of experiences he wants. And he can never create them because he believes that all women his age and older have already been ruined by Chads.
She's probably completely incapable of loving anyone like she did when she was 16, 17, 15, when she got with that first Chad, whatever.
So while it's true he feels inept, fat, ugly, frustrated about his autism, in other words like a lower value man, but it's not just about being unable to attract a partner for Jake. In fact, he points out the obvious. Women do find him attractive. He's the problem.
And I did have girls into me. Some of them couldn't have made it more obvious. Like, I remember one time they came in front of me and was like, I'm fucking stupid, ridiculous mental barriers. Fucking, and now...
He felt that he had missed out on losing his virginity as a teen, felt the perceived unfairness of this, and believed he had screwed himself.
I hate it when people say, oh, teenage love is overrated. Bro, you only say that. The reality is, you know, it's the most exciting, most new, amazing experience of your life. That's the reality.
And while this is clearly a skewed vision of the world, consider this. He's autistic, so he's inclined to obsessive thinking and a lifetime of social disconnect.
I'm autistic, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not very social. I'm naturally quite asocial, so I don't have big social circles to where I know I can meet girls and connect up with girls.
In fact, there is a black pill specifically for autistics, and is sadly one of the more easily arguable black pills, though it still has some really interesting oversights. Like, for instance, they claim that 44.6% of male autistics are virgins, which is true according to a study of under 60 men, but they leave out the number of participants being really low, and also that this doesn't account for the fact that the study actually had 45 heterosexual men, 6 homosexual men, 4 bisexual men, and 1 who had no sexual orientation. So because roughly 1/5 of them are not heterosexual, and the virgin stat goes for all men, it's unclear how many men are heterosexual and virginal, which is the statistic that the incels are actually worried about. Though my understanding is that they probably assume the answer has to be that all the virgins are the straight guys because many men are seen in a sort of toxic way as just DTF, less desiring of non-sexual intimacy, and frankly kind of desperate. So why would a gay man be a virgin?
What data have you seen that has brought you to this conclusion? Because I'm now curious where I can get this data from.
I couldn't reference it offhand, but I believe there was a study that I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
But if he's right that losing your virginity as a teen is a rite of passage, it's not like you can go back in time and do it again because you can't change the past. So of course he bought into the incel ideology because he believed he was inept. And this meant that even if he was able to find a girlfriend, it was too late for him to have those experiences. This is what he was talking about with them being ruined by Chads. It seems in his mind that time, in a sense, had cucked him. But there's something more to it here. He's mad at himself and the world for missing a rite of passage, losing one's virginity in their teens. And he feels like he completely missed out and cannot recapture it both because of personal mistakes, but also because of his life situation, living with his mother in the UK and having autism and being socially inept, and this red pill stuff. So he gets even deeper into the black pill ideology as he more and more feels like all is lost. But he desperately seeks to learn how to stop feeling this way by asking other incels for help. And he's mostly met with resistance, mockery, and pointing out his internal inconsistencies like being a libertarian that also talks about social welfare and forced rehabilitation in essence to reprogram incels, sending up even more red flags. He even posts about guns in the UK and mass shootings on Reddit, including some false information about the history of mass shootings beginning with Charles Whitman in 1966. But Jake made more and more desperate attempts to fix his problems until he made an incredibly despicable, desperate action that got him banned from Reddit. He meets a 16-year-old American girl somewhere on the site, telling her that he's entitled to a 16-year-old girlfriend, if only she'd travel to the UK where it's legal. Which is not only a clear example of grooming, pedophilia, seeing others as objects, and harassment, but it creeped her out enough to report him, and his account was terminated on August 11th. This cuts him off from basically his only social connection to the world, and rightfully so. However, with his life more and more in tatters, his downward spiral progresses even more quickly until the next day. But you can see him here meandering pointlessly in a small store on August 11th. Maybe a bored young man, but maybe somebody considering committing an atrocity.
I'm going to keep trying, I'm always going to keep trying. I think as long as you're breathing air, it's like in the Terminator, right? Everything's rigged against you. There's no hope for humanity. We're on the brink of extinction. That can't be beaten, can't be outsmarted. But yet, humanity still tries to fight to the end. I know it's a movie, but I like to think sometimes, I'm a Terminator or something. Despite reaching almost total system failure, he keeps trying to accomplish his mission.
On the morning of August 12th, 2021, he finally said hello to a neighbor that says good morning to him every day. Jake had never responded before. Around 6 p.m., he gets in a loud fight with his mother, Maxine Davison, 53, in their shared house on Biddick Drive. She went into her bedroom and locked the door. Jake kicked in her door and shot her in the head and chest with a pump-action shotgun, killing her instantly. After leaving the house, dressed in all black, with a blank expression on his face, Jake walked down Biddick Drive, where he comes across 3-year-old Sophie Martin and her dad, Lee Martin, 42, walking their dog. Without saying a thing, Jake raises his shotgun and fires at them as they try to flee. Lee, as any loving father would, used his body to shield Sophie from the first shot and took most of it to his abdomen. Both, unfortunately, were shot in the head and died shortly thereafter at Darraford Hospital. Jake ambled on, heading further down Biddick Street, where he ran into a 53-year-old woman, Michelle Parsonage, and her 33-year-old son, Ben. After shooting them, Jake took a right and headed in a snaky path, which from an American perspective looks like a tiny park. On this path, he unfortunately comes across Stephen Washington, 59, who was walking his huskies, and shot him in the chest, leaving him to die. One of the huskies ran away, the other ran home. After Jake ambled out of the park, he took a left and headed down Royal Navy Avenue to Henderson Place, where he shot Kate Shepard, 66, in the abdomen. And then he walks just a little further down the road, but hearing the police sirens all around him closing in, he decides to take his own life by shooting himself before they can find him. And that quickly it was all over. In the 12-minute rampage on August 12, 2021, he killed 6 people, including himself and his mother, and wounding 2 others, Michelle Parsonage and her son Ben. They were the only survivors.
Just after 6, my son was up there, obviously with his friends at the dog park. He said he heard a big bang.
A couple of the gunshots went off and I ran opposite a pub.
Yeah, it was like... And it was about a couple of seconds, and again, and again, and again.
The bloke was walking towards me with a black rifle. Vacant, just a vacant stare, like. I could smell the gunfire.
She was an amazing little girl. He was a great dad. She hasn't even started her life. It's terrible.
There is no motive, as we know, at present.
And I noticed a woman on the doorstep with a shot. I went to her, put pressure on the wound and that, and comfort her there.
Sad time for this part of the world. But our community will show the rest of it how good we are.
Unfortunately, at least 300 people witnessed at least part of the attack, including children. But Plymouth is a close-knit community and really made a concerted effort to make sure everyone felt safe and that this would never happen again in their community. The Plymouth community came together and funded trauma counseling, especially for the children. While absolutely devastating for their community, they show a very human way to react to these situations that Americans are all too numb to. They are investing £1 million into counseling, new police, better police training, community safeguards, and protective devices. A third-party watchdog group audited this case and found several issues with the application for the firearm in the first place. For instance, not having put the first assault on record because he shouldn't have been able to get a gun. They improperly accepted a letter from Jake's GP that said he didn't know him well enough to say if he should have a gun. And also, they raised concerns about why he was given back the gun after completing the Pathfinder program in July. Though the UK as a whole is updating their gun regulations based on the findings of this one watchdog group from this one case. Seems to work much better than hopes and prayers, but maybe I'm just cynical. Now, it's important to point out I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not an incel, so these incel positions are not my opinions. They're my best understanding of Jake's and incel's opinions as an outsider. But just to be clear, his actions are reprehensible and abhorrent. He was misogynistic, at least at the time of the incident, and was a bully who stalked people. So I'm not making excuses for him. Rather, I'm seeking an explanatory model for his behavior, so hopefully we can see these types of people before they get to this level. So I believe that while these beliefs definitely increase the likelihood someone will become a misogynist, and they definitely increase the likelihood that Jake would become a mass shooter, they didn't cause him to become a shooter. They just worsened his situation to the point that this kind of thing was more likely to happen, and it did. But it may still have happened without Jake ever finding incel culture. This is a situation where tragedy was more and more likely because he was an impulsively violent autistic man given to intense obsessions who already had the feeling that he was a complete outcast. You can see this in his writing, but most clearly on his now deleted Facebook wall, that when people don't respond, it really reminds him of how worthless he is. But just to be clear here, autistic people are not necessarily violent. I'm just saying that Jake was violent and autistic. I think it's pretty clear in Jake's case that he hates women at this point in his life, but it doesn't seem like he hates women for women's sake. It's more like he hates women because he feels hopelessly thwarted and like they're part of that. So I believe incel is actually a word that describes the feeling of being unworthy of others' sexual or romantic interest. And as such, people who feel denied sexual interest feel invisible and not important to others. And while in some cases this may be true, in this case, other than autism and poverty, Jake actually is a Chad. A thing I find highly perplexing about this ideology is that so many of these men don't realize their position within the ideology. But in Jake's case, he was dealt a somewhat a crappy hand, which clouded his judgment, and wouldn't allow him to see anything good, and it just progressively got harder and harder to care about anything, and easier to hate everything, because he felt like he was dealt such a bad hand. He was also impulsive, and it's pretty fair to say he was a bully. And it's so incredibly sad for everyone involved, but especially the unrelated victims, that he decided to deal with his issues this way. None of them deserved this, but especially not a happy, loving 3-year-old girl. Jake's darkness snuffed out their lights over a misapprehension of reality that led him to extreme existential despair. He felt like he was problematic, in the way, unworthy, just an object, and a shitty one at that. Life is pointless, and he missed out on all the valuable things in life already, and since it was only getting worse, why bother? When you add the attitude of, nothing changes no matter what I try, so why should I even care, to resentment that can be solved or quieted with violence, and then also add thwarted belongingness and suicidal intention, you basically have the mental profile of a mass shooter. And if you're watching right now and feel as distraught, or like blackpill is ruining your life, I implore you to get mental health treatment. It's not as hard as it seems, and you're worth it. But let's take a moment to remember the victims, and hope blackpilled incels and anyone they may have harmed are able to get the help they need. Though again, despite there being a few really notorious cases like this, more often than not the result is going to be self-harm. And there's probably something to Dr. Honda's theory that many incels are raised conservative, have an over-domineering father, and approach dating and puberty and virginity with a skewed model to begin with. So I ask you again to consider, is the misogyny we see from incels really about hating things externally to them, or more about finding a validation for their self-loathing or worsening defeatist attitudes? Is it a reaction formation to protect a weak, scared little boy inside of an adult man? For more videos like this, subscribe. Hitting like and sharing the video with your friends really helps me out, so please do so if you're so inclined. And if you're ready for more true crime, I highly recommend you check out these videos from my channel.
But anyway, see you guys later.